The Millionaire CEO mistook a poor waitress for his blind date, but what happened next shocked everyone. The restaurant exuded wealth and exclusivity, soft golden lights, polished mahogany tables, and the hum of hushed conversations. It was the kind of place where deals worth millions were made over a glass of vintage wine. Matthew Sinclair sat at a private booth near the window, his expression one of bored indifference. The CEO of Sinclair Enterprises was a man who commanded power, yet at this moment he felt utterly powerless. His parents had arranged this blind date, insisting it was time he settled down with someone appropriate. And now he was here, waiting for a woman he had no interest in meeting. A waiter passed by, but he barely noticed. His eyes were locked on a young woman walking toward his table. Her uniform, a simple white blouse and black apron, was far from what he expected, but something about her posture, her confidence, intrigued him. He raised an eyebrow. This was his date? She stopped at the edge of the table, a slight crease forming between her brows as she pulled out a small notepad. "Good evening, sir. Can I take your order?" Matthew let out a short, amused breath. So he mused, leaning back slightly. This is my mother's idea of a suitable match. The woman blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Excuse me." "I have to admit," he continued, his tone laced with condescension, "I wasn't expecting my blind date to arrive in a waitress uniform." Sophia Carter stared at him. For a second she was too stunned to speak. Then realization dawned. Her grip on the notepad tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said coolly. "I work here, and I certainly am not your date." Matthew frowned slightly. "You're not?" She let out a sharp breath, crossing her arms. "No, and for the record, if I were, I wouldn't be caught dead having dinner with a guy who looks at people like they're beneath him." His jaw tensed. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said, her voice unwavering. "Now, are you ordering something or just wasting my time?" For the first time in a long time, Matthew Sinclair was left speechless. The tension between them hung thick in the air. Matthew blinked, processing what had just happened. He wasn't the type to make mistakes, yet here he was, mistaking a waitress for his date and insulting her in the process. Sophia, meanwhile, was fuming. Of all the arrogant, entitled men. Just as she was about to turn and walk away, another woman approached the table, tall, elegant, wearing an expensive navy blue dress. She glanced at Matthew, then at Sophia, her expression curious. "I'm sorry for being late," she said smoothly, sliding into the chair across from him. Traffic was terrible. Sophia's stomach dropped. So this was the real blind date. Matthew's entire demeanor shifted, his confidence wavered, his mistake suddenly painfully obvious. Sophia watched as realization hit him. He had just insulted the wrong woman. For a moment, their eyes met. A flicker of something passed between them, annoyance, curiosity, maybe even intrigue. Then, Sophia did the only thing she could do. She turned on her heel and walked away. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Sophia did her best to ignore the rude, arrogant CEO sitting in the VIP section, though she could still feel his gaze on her from time to time. She hated that she even noticed. She was just finishing up her shift when it happened. One of the guests, a middle-aged man with a little too much to drink, stumbled as he tried to rise from his chair. Unfortunately, he bumped right into Sophia, sending the tray in her hands tilting dangerously. A full glass of red wine tipped over, spilling straight onto Matthew Sinclair's crisp white shirt. For a long moment, the entire room fell silent. Sophia froze, horrified. She braced herself for his fury. She had seen men like him before, entitled, privileged, the kind who lashed out at people who didn't serve them properly. Matthew slowly rose from his seat, eyes locked onto the drunken man who had caused the accident. The air around him changed, a sharp, controlled rage simmering just beneath the surface. The drunk man chuckled, clearly oblivious. "Oops, my bad." Matthew's fingers clenched at his sides, his jaw tightened. The restaurant manager rushed over, eyes wide. "Mr. Sinclair, I sincerely apologize." Matthew cut him off, his voice cold as ice. "Get him out of here." The manager didn't hesitate, signaling for security to escort the drunk man outside. Sophia watched in stunned silence. Then, to her complete shock, Matthew turned to her. "You okay?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What?" He sighed, as if annoyed by his own concern. "I asked if you were okay." She shook her head, regaining her composure. "I should be the one asking you that. You're the one covered in wine." Matthew glanced down at his ruined shirt, and let out a quiet chuckle. It was the first time she had seen him smile. "I suppose I am." For the first time that night, Sophia saw something different in him. Not just the cold, arrogant CEO, but a man who, despite his flaws, had just defended her without hesitation. But before she could make sense of it, his walls went back up. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek black wallet. Sophia's eyes narrowed. "If you're about to offer me money, don't bother." He paused, studying her. "You really are something else." With that, he tossed a few bills onto the table, not for her, but to pay for his meal, and walked out, leaving Sophia standing there, completely thrown. She had wanted nothing more than to never see Matthew Sinclair again. But somehow, she had a feeling this wasn't the last time their paths would. Matthew Sinclair had dealt with countless business negotiations, hostile takeovers, and high-stakes meetings. He was used to analyzing numbers, reading people, and calculating his every move. Yet, for some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about a certain stubborn waitress. It had been days since the incident at the restaurant. He told himself it was insignificant, that Sophia Carter was just a woman who had briefly disrupted his evening. But then why did her sharp words still linger in his mind? "I wouldn't be caught dead having dinner with a guy who looks at people like they're beneath him." No one talked to him like that. No one challenged him. And yet she had. Without fear. Without hesitation. He had spent his life surrounded by people who either wanted something from him or were too afraid to speak their minds. Sophia Carter was neither. And that intrigued him. So when he accidentally ran into her again, he wasn't sure whether it was coincidence or fate. It was late afternoon, and Matthew had stopped by a small cafe near his office for a quick espresso. The place was modest, nothing like the high-end restaurants he usually frequented. But the moment he stepped inside, his eyes landed on her. Sophia was behind the counter, taking orders with that same determined expression on her face. She hadn't seen him yet. Matthew should have walked away. Instead, he stepped forward, casually placing his hands in his pockets as he watched her interact with customers. She was efficient, polite, but not overly friendly. It was clear she was just here to do her job, not to entertain anyone. When it was finally his turn in line, Sophia looked up, then immediately frowned. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. Matthew smirked. "Nice to see you too." Her jaw clenched. "What are you doing here?" He shrugged. "Getting coffee. Isn't that what people do at cafes?" Sophia let out a short laugh, shaking her head as she grabbed a cup. "Great. Just my luck." Matthew leaned against the counter, watching her with amusement. "Relax, Carter. I'm not here to make your life miserable." She didn't look convinced, but as she handed him his coffee, their fingers briefly brushed. A small thing. A meaningless touch. But it left both of them momentarily frozen. Sophia was the first to pull away, clearing her throat. "Enjoy your coffee." Matthew took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers. Somehow, he knew this wouldn't be the last time they crossed paths. Sophia hated him. She hated how he looked at her like she was some kind of puzzle he wanted to solve. She hated how he kept showing up, as if the universe was playing some cruel joke on her. But most of all, she hated that part of her was starting to notice him. Not just his ridiculously good looks, but the way he actually listened when she spoke, the way he seemed oddly fascinated by her. And that was dangerous, because Sophia knew his type, rich, privileged, used to getting whatever they wanted. She wouldn't be another temporary distraction for a man like Matthew Sinclair. So she did what she always did, she avoided him. Or at least she tried to. But Matthew wasn't the type to be ignored. One evening, after finishing her shift at the cafe, she stepped outside, only to find him waiting by his car. She groaned. "Seriously?" Matthew smirked, leaning casually against the sleek black sports car. "Relax, I'm not stalking you." Could have fooled me. He let out a chuckle, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small envelope. Sophia's stomach twisted. "What's that?" she asked cautiously. "Money," Matthew said simply, holding it out to her. "Consider it compensation for what happened at the restaurant. Or, if you prefer, a thank you for the entertainment." Sophia's eyes flashed with anger. "Compensation? Like she was some charity case he could throw money at." Her blood boiled. She snatched the envelope, then promptly shoved it right back into his chest. "I don't need your money," she hissed. Matthew's smirk faltered for the first time. "Excuse me, you think just because you're rich you can buy people off?" she snapped. "I don't need handouts, Sinclair." He stared at her, clearly not used to being rejected. Most people would have taken the money without question. But Sophia, she was different. And suddenly, Matthew didn't want to leave. Instead, he took a step closer, his voice lower now. "Why are you so damn stubborn?" Sophia folded her arms. "Why do you care?" A beat of silence. Neither of them moved. The air between them was thick with something neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Finally, Matthew exhaled, slipping the envelope back into his pocket. "Fine, keep your pride." Sophia narrowed her eyes, gladly. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Matthew watched her go, shaking his head with a quiet chuckle. He had dealt with hostile boardrooms, ruthless competitors, and billion-dollar deals. But nothing was as frustrating as Sophia Carter. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he wanted to win or just keep playing the game. Matthew Sinclair didn't believe in coincidences. And yet, he kept running into Sophia Carter. At first, he had convinced himself it was just mild curiosity, a temporary distraction from his high-pressure life. But then, one evening, everything changed. Matthew had been on his way to his car after a late-night business dinner when he saw her. Sophia was outside the cafe where she worked, crouching down beside an elderly homeless man who sat shivering on the sidewalk. He watched, hidden in the shadows, unnoticed, as she removed her scarf and gently wrapped it around the man's frail shoulders. She handed him a warm cup of coffee, then dug into her own coat pocket, pulling out what looked like a few crumpled bills, probably all she had left from her shift. Matthew had seen people throw money at problems before. But Sophia? She didn't just give. She cared. For the first time since meeting her, he felt something shift inside him. She wasn't just some stubborn, sharp-tongued waitress. She was so much more than that. And for the first time in years, Matthew Sinclair, the man who had everything, realized that he might be missing something after all. Sophia had always thought Matthew Sinclair was incapable of kindness. But then one day she walked into the cafe and found her boss talking in hushed whispers with another employee. "Someone paid off the last 3 months' rent for this place," her boss said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I don't know who it was, but whoever did it saved us." Sophia froze. Her mind instantly flashed to a certain arrogant, insufferable billionaire. She shook her head. No, it couldn't be him. Could it? Pooh. For the first time she found herself wondering, was Matthew Sinclair really the man she had painted him to be? It started as an ordinary evening at the cafe. Sophia was working the late shift, moving quickly between tables, balancing trays with ease. Everything was normal, until he walked in. A man in an expensive suit, probably a businessman, mid-40s, oozing money and arrogance. One of the regulars. And very clearly interested in Sophia. Matthew had come in just for coffee. That was all. Or so he told himself. But the moment he saw the man leaning in too close, smirking at Sophia like she was a prize to be won, something inside him snapped. He strode across the cafe without thinking, his footsteps loud against the tiled floor. Just as the man reached out to touch Sophia's hand, Matthew's voice cut through the air like a blade. "She's busy." The cafe fell silent. Sophia looked up, startled. "Matthew." The businessman raised an amused eyebrow. "And you are?" Matthew's jaw clenched. "Someone who doesn't enjoy watching others waste her time." The businessman chuckled, clearly unfazed. "Relax. I was just offering the lady a drink." Matthew's eyes darkened. "She's working." Sophia let out a slow breath, annoyed but also slightly intrigued. "Matthew, it's fine," she said, though a small smirk played on her lips. "Unless, of course, you're jealous." Matthew stiffened. For a second, something unreadable flickered across his face, something raw, something real. Then, just as quickly, his expression shut down. "I just don't like seeing people take advantage of you," he muttered, stepping back. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Right, because you care so much." Matthew didn't respond. He just turned, throwing one last glare at the businessman before striding out of the cafe. But as he walked away, his own words replayed in his head. "I just don't like seeing people take advantage of you." Had that been a lie? Or was he starting to care more than he wanted to admit? The next few weeks were different. Matthew was still Matthew, still arrogant, still impossible at times, but Sophia began noticing small things. Like how he stopped going to his usual high-end coffee spots and started showing up at her cafe more often. Like how he always left bigger tips than necessary, but only when she wasn't looking. Like how her shifts magically got shorter whenever he was around, as if someone had convinced her boss to give her a break. At first, she tried to ignore it. But then, one evening, she came home to find a bag of groceries sitting at her doorstep. Inside were fresh vegetables, pasta, and even a small bar of chocolate. There was no note, no indication of who had left it. But Sophia knew, and for the first time she let herself wonder, was she falling for him? Matthew Sinclair had always prided himself on being a man of logic. Emotions? They were distractions. Attachments, they led to weakness. And yet, here he was, thinking about Sophia Carter every damn day. At first he told himself it was nothing, just a passing curiosity. But then came the little things. How he caught himself watching her when she wasn't looking. How he memorized the way her nose scrunched up when she was annoyed. How her laugh, light, unguarded, made something tighten in his chest. And worst of all, how he couldn't stand the thought of another man being close to her. It hit him one evening when he found himself parked outside her apartment building. He wasn't even sure how he got there. He had left work late, exhausted, but instead of driving home, his car had brought him here. As if she was the only place he wanted to be. That realization scared the hell out of him. Because if he let himself love her, really love her, then what? Could he even give her the life she deserved? They were from two completely different worlds. His world was ruthless, built on money and power. Her world was pure, full of kindness he wasn't sure he deserved. Eventually, one of them would get hurt. And Matthew Sinclair refused to be the reason she ended up broken. So he made a choice. A stupid, painful choice. He would end it before it could truly begin. Sophia had been feeling it for weeks, the shift in Matthew. The way he had started pulling away. At first she thought she was imagining it. But then came the canceled plans, the unanswered texts. The way his once warm glances turned cold, guarded. And then she overheard the conversation that shattered her heart. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. She had just been passing by the hallway outside Matthew's office when she heard his mother's sharp, clipped voice. "She's not right for you, Matthew. You know that." Sophia froze. Matthew's voice came next, quiet but firm. "She has nothing to do with this." His father scoffed. "She's a waitress, Matthew. A nobody. Do you really think someone like her belongs in our family?" Sophia's stomach twisted. She wanted to walk away. She didn't want to hear any more. But then, Matthew's response came. "She won't be a problem," he said, his tone flat, emotionless. "She's not part of my life." A sharp, crushing pain exploded in her chest. She staggered back, her breath caught in her throat. She had been so stupid, so foolish to believe that Matthew Sinclair, the CEO, the billionaire, the man who had everything, would ever choose her. She was just a passing interest, a game. And now, the game was over. By the time Matthew left the office that night, Sophia was already gone. She had packed her things, quit her job, and disappeared. Because if she had learned anything from loving Matthew Sinclair, it was knowing when to walk away. Matthew Sinclair had spent his life chasing success, power, and control. But now, none of it mattered. Not when Sophia was gone. The moment he walked into the cafe and saw her station empty, something inside him snapped. She was gone. No goodbye, no explanation. It was as if she had erased herself from his life completely. And that was when Matthew truly understood. He loved her. Not in the way he had loved anything else in his life, not like a business deal, not like an investment. This was different, real, terrifying. Because Sophia Carter wasn't replaceable. She wasn't just a woman who had challenged him, frustrated him. She was the woman who had changed him. And without her, his world felt painfully empty. So he did the one thing he had never done before. He chased after someone. Finding Sophia wasn't easy. She had quit her job, changed her number, and disappeared. But Matthew Sinclair had never backed down from a challenge. And he wasn't about to start now. After pulling every string he had, he finally found her, working at a small bookshop on the other side of town. And this time, he wasn't going to let her walk away. It was raining when Matthew arrived. The bookshop was small but cozy, the warm glow of lights spilling out onto the street. And there, standing behind the counter stacking books, was her. Sophia. His heart clenched at the sight of her. She looked different, not just because of the simple sweater she wore, or the way her hair was pulled back, but because of the way her eyes no longer held that spark when she looked at him. And that killed him. He stepped inside. The moment she saw him, she froze. Silence hung between them, thick and heavy. Then, before she could tell him to leave, he spoke. Loudly. In front of everyone. "I was wrong, Sophia. A few customers turned their heads. Sophia's breath hitched. Matthew. But he didn't stop. I was a coward, he admitted. I thought pushing you away was the right thing to do. I thought I was protecting you. Her hands trembled. But the truth. Matthew stepped closer, his voice raw. I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting myself. Her eyes widened. I was afraid, he continued, his voice breaking. Afraid of loving you. Afraid of what it meant. Sophia's lips parted, but no words came out. Matthew took another step. Close enough to touch. But you know what I'm even more afraid of? His voice dropped to a whisper. Living without you. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. The bookshop was silent. No one moved, no one spoke. And then, softly, she whispered back. You idiot. And before Matthew could react, she was in his arms. For weeks, Sophia had tried to convince herself it was over. That Matthew Sinclair would never come after her. That what they had wasn't real. But now she knew. Because he had come. Because he had chosen her. And as she buried her face against his chest, his arms tightening around her, she knew there was only one answer she could give. Yes, she whispered. Matthew pulled back slightly, searching her eyes. Yes? Sophia laughed through her tears. Yes, you idiot. I love you too. Matthew let out a shaky breath, then kissed her. And this time, there were no doubts. No contracts, no fears. Just them. Finally choosing each other. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in soft hues of gold and lavender. The gentle sound of waves crashing against the shore filled the air, a perfect backdrop to the most important night of Matthew Sinclair's life. He stood on the private beach, the soft sand cool beneath his feet, his heartbeat steady, but full of anticipation. Everything was perfect. A candlelit path leading to a beautifully decorated gazebo. Soft music playing in the background. And in just a few moments, Sophia would arrive. This time, there was no misunderstanding, no contract, no hesitation. This time, it was real. Sophia had no idea what Matthew had planned. She thought they were just going away for a quiet weekend, a break from the busy life they had built together. But as she stepped onto the beach, following the flickering candles leading toward the gazebo, her breath caught in her throat. And then she saw him. Matthew stood there, dressed in a simple white shirt and slacks, but he had never looked more handsome. Her heart pounded. When she reached him, he took her hands, his eyes filled with something so raw, so deep, that it made her knees weak. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, Matthew dropped to one knee. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes instantly filling with tears. Sophia Carter, he said softly, a year ago I mistook you for someone else, but the truth is, I've never been more grateful for a mistake in my life. She let out a shaky laugh, blinking back tears. You changed me, Matthew continued. You made me see the world differently. You made me a better man. And now, I can't imagine a life without you. His voice wavered slightly as he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a stunning diamond ring. So, Sophia, he said, his voice filled with quiet vulnerability. Will you marry me? Sophia let out a small sob, then nodded furiously. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes, Matthew. 1,000 times yes. The moment he slid the ring onto her finger, he pulled her into his arms, pressing a deep, lingering kiss to her lips. And in that moment, Sophia knew this was forever. 1 year later, the wedding was a dream. A beautiful, intimate ceremony surrounded by their closest friends and family. But more than the wedding, what mattered most was what they built together. With Sophia's passion for helping others and Matthew's resources, they established the Carter Sinclair Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping underprivileged families and funding educational programs for children in need. And every day, Matthew woke up knowing he was exactly where he was meant to be. Not just a powerful CEO, not just a man with wealth and success, but a husband, a partner, a man who had learned that love wasn't a weakness, but the greatest strength of all. As he watched Sophia laughing with a group of children at one of their charity events, his heart swelled. She turned to him, catching his gaze, and smiled. And Matthew Sinclair, the man who once believed love had no place in his life, smiled back. Because now he knew better. Now he knew that love was the best mistake he had ever made. Matthew Sinclair thought he had everything, money, power, success, but it took one unexpected mistake, one fearless woman, and one undeniable love to show him what truly mattered. Sophia Carter never imagined that a misunderstanding would lead her to the love of her life. But fate has a way of bringing the right people together, even in the most unexpected ways. They came from two different worlds, but in the end, love was the bridge that connected them. Now, as they build a future together, not just for themselves but for those in need, they prove that love isn't just about finding the right person. It's about choosing them every single day. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss another heartwarming, emotional tale. Because sometimes, the best love stories begin with a simple mistake. Love always finds a way, even when we least expect it.